Hi, I'm Deborah,
And I'm Lawrence.
and in this video, we're going to talk about 5 ways in which you can try to ensure that your child's treatment for depression is
Good.
effective. We're going to include some of our own experiences. So like a subtitle for this video could be like "Learn from my mistakes." Lawrence got depression at a pretty young age, and there was definitely a lot of things we did wrong. But not him, but Lawrence's father and I did wrong. I have years of experience writing about depression, and it still, when it came to my child, there were things that, looking back, I wish I had been more forceful or done more research. So it's completely understandable if your child has been diagnosed with depression and you're really scared and you're afraid you're going to get it wrong. We figured that it would be helpful to go over some of these things. Like I said, learn from my mistakes. So the first thing is, unless your child is very young or severely depressed, you really need to include them in all treatment discussions and decisions. Obviously, being the parent, there are certain things you know and have experience with that they don't, but you need to include them and give them agency and listen to them and take their wishes into account. Remember, this is not just medical decisions about like a physical condition they have. A lot of the depression could be wrapped up in some issues they have about not feeling in control of their lives, and the last thing you want to do is exacerbate that problem by not including them in the discussions. And if it takes some explaining to them about medications or treatment, good. That's they should know exactly what is going on with the treatment and be able to, again, depending on their age, make some informed decisions.
I'd hope it goes without saying that when it comes to someone else's depression treatment, their opinion should be considered because it's their mental illness, it's their depression, so it would be frankly kind of dumb to not include them in it.
But a lot of times parents either don't want to worry kids with this stuff, or they figure that they don't have the experience. But this is, if you feel there's any question about whether you respect your child and respect their feelings, then this is definitely the time to examine those feelings, because this is really important. And the second way that you can try to ensure that their treatment is successful is change doctors. If you feel that this doctor is not fully committed to your child's full recovery. Now, notice I'm not saying cure. There is no cure for depression.
No.
But there is recovery from, for instance, serious phases of depression, and there is management.
Episodes.
Episodes. Yeah, episodes.
I think for sure, I've had experience with doctors who, haven't quite understood what I was dealing with or weren't receptive to it. And so, we changed doctors until I found one that was good. And I definitely think that, depression treatment, if you don't have a cooperative doctor, then you're not going to get treatment.
And caring too. Lawrence has ADHD, and even before he was diagnosed with depression, he saw a doctor for his ADHD. And basically, the way the appointments went after the initial appointment was he'd weigh Lawrence to see, what his weight was, so he'd decide what dosage of medication, and that was pretty much it. So he didn't ask, how are things going in school? How's the medication working? Does he need any coping strategies or anything? If you feel that this doctor is not completely committed to your child getting back to a normal mood. Okay, no one expects them to be happy all the time. Okay, because no one's happy all the time. Obviously, there are ups and downs, but there are normal ups and downs, and then there's down from
there's depression.
Yeah. So obviously, there's a big difference. Doctors see a lot of patients. Okay, so a lot of them are busy. However, if the doctor isn't willing, when you say, my child still isn't, their mood really hasn't changed. They're functional, but they're not, they're not doing great. Their mood is still not fantastic, or this medication is making them feel numb emotionally, or if they say, well, they're better than they were, that this is not the right doctor. Okay, then it's not just a case of them being busy. They just don't care enough. And that's definitely not someone you want taking care of your child's mental health. So if the doctor isn't committed to persevering until your child's mood is normal, find another doctor, and if necessary, another doctor and another doctor until you find one that cares. And the third piece of advice we have as far as ensuring that your child's depression treatment is successful is research their medication.
Yeah, I mean, like I've taken medications in the past for depression which have had very negative side effects, to the point where we went, all right, this is, the benefit is outweighed by the negatives of the side effects, so we need to find a different medication. And so, yeah, there were a few like that, and now I've settled on one that works for me and doesn't present pretty much any side effects. So I'm lucky in that respect that it didn't take years to find a working one. It only took a couple tries.
Yeah, and first of all, learn from my mistake. I did not read, I should have known this after years of writing about mental health. I did not read the list of side effects. And again, I was too trusting of the doctors to tell me if there was a side effect that I might want to watch out for, or one that we wanted to consider. There was one situation in which Lawrence was taking an add-on drug. So with depression, if someone has like a partial response where they're doing okay, sometimes what they'll do is they will add a second drug, and it's not always an antidepressant. And one of them, I can't remember which one it was, but it had a possible side effect of tardive dyskinesia. And I'm going to read what it is, because I'm not good at explaining this stuff. Tardive dyskinesia is an involuntary neurological movement disorder. So it might be tics, it might be like face twitching. Someone I knew in the past who had schizophrenia and took antipsychotic, the medication for schizophrenia, had those tics. And here's the thing, it can be permanent even after you go off the medication.
That certainly explains some things.
So the doctor didn't bother to tell us, by the way, this medicine might have a side effect of tardive dyskinesia, and that can be permanent even if he goes off the medicine, okay? So I think at some point I looked at the side effects and I was like, what? Because as I said, I had experience with someone who had it. And I was like, no. And when he went off it, I was just praying that it wouldn't be permanent. So you would assume that a doctor would tell you something like that, but he didn't. So in other words, do not trust the doctors. There's plenty of stuff online. Look up any side effect you don't understand and read up on it.
Yeah, like tardive dyskinesia, that's not something you see and you immediately know what it is.
And there are other side effects. Remember, some antidepressants can have the side effect of suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation. So if your child doesn't have suicidal thoughts, you want to know then if they go on this medicine, is there a chance? And then that's something you want to handle. And we did a video about talking to your child about suicide. So you might want to watch that, because we talk about what the things you should do if this happens. There's also the possibility of contraindications with other medications or supplements or over-the-counter medication. For instance, at some point, Lawrence, I think, was taking melatonin to help him with sleep. Well, but then when he went on the antidepressants, we had to take them off him. There are many antidepressants that have a contraindication, which means they react badly with melatonin. So don't assume that something that's a supplement or over-the-counter will not have any kind of problem with medication. I found actually more information by talking to pharmacists in a lot of ways than doctors. So the other thing is, if your doctor wants you to try the newest medication,
Don't
think
be
twice.
a guinea pig.
Yeah. I've had a couple doctors, and not all of them psychiatrists or treating me for depression, who were like, well, this medicine is new, so it has to be better. Okay, not always the case. And you know what? You do not want to be guinea pigs. I actually had this with my MS. A new medicine came out. My neurologist sent me a letter about it. Was like, oh, you should start taking this. I said to my husband, I don't want to be the guinea pig. Sure enough, like a year later, we found out it can cause rare brain disease in some people, potentially fatal. There's nothing wrong with tried and true. And if something's brand new, especially if it's off-label might mean that they're using it, that it's a drug. For instance, a couple of the ones Lawrence was taking as an adjunct to his antidepressant were off-label. So they were approved by the FDA for one purpose, but doctors would use them sometimes for another purpose. That's not to say it didn't work for that other purpose. But the other thing is the FDA doesn't always study how a drug affects children at the same time that they approve it for use in adults. So a drug might be approved for use in adults, but not approved for use in children. That doesn't mean, again, that there's something wrong with it. But you need to think about, unless you're desperate, unless nothing else has worked, I would go with the tried and true first.
Yeah.
Okay? There are plenty of antidepressants, many antidepressants, many schools or families of antidepressants, different kinds to try. Just know exactly what the side effects, the potential harm that it could do to your child before you tell them to go ahead.
Yeah.
And the fourth suggestion we're going to have is be persistent if the treatment isn't working. And, this may go against your normal personality. You may be one of those people who doesn't like to make a fuss, who doesn't like to disagree with people, especially a lot of people don't like to disagree with doctors. So this may go against everything that, is you. But be persistent. Just keep asking questions. Be obnoxious if necessary. Even if you see the doctor rolling their eyes, who cares? Who cares? Okay? The important thing is that your child probably, unless they're in their mid to late teens, is unlikely to advocate for themselves. Children don't tend to speak up to, against or contradict adults. Okay, so
especially people like doctors.
Yeah, and especially kids who are depressed. Okay, so it's up to you to be persistent and keep saying, this isn't working. Okay, let's try another one. Challenge the doctor saying, this, we don't need to do more tests. Lawrence has trouble sleeping, and he's had sleep studies. He has obstructive sleep apnea, and so he's had a CPAP machine for years, and his pulmonologist said, well, everything looks fine. He was still exhausted. His pulmonologist said, everything looks fine. And when my husband told me, I said, but that's not good enough. I don't care if everything looks fine. he's exhausted all the time. So obviously everything is not fine.
If there's still an issue and your doctor is saying no, everything's fine, find a new doctor.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
let them just tell you, yeah, no, there's nothing going on. Everything's fine. Because if there's something wrong, there is something wrong.
If you have to see a different type of doctor, so for instance, like there's always the possibility there's an underlying medical condition. If your child's doctor, your child psychiatrist or GP, family doctor, if that's who's doing it, has not run tests to make sure there isn't a thyroid condition, to make sure there isn't like a sleep apnea condition, things like that. If they haven't done that, then you need to demand that those tests are run. Okay, if your child has a thyroid condition, they're not going to be being treated for depression is not going to treat the thyroid condition. So you need to be very thorough and very persistent and, like I said, obnoxious if you have to. Okay, because remember who you're doing this for. And the fifth suggestion, advice we have for making sure your child's depression treatment works is move on from bad therapists or therapists that your child does not have chemistry with. There are bad therapists, and then there are therapists that your child doesn't click with, and that there's nothing wrong with that. They could be a great therapist, but they're just not right for your child. And if your child doesn't have chemistry with a therapist, the therapy is not going to
Yeah, the therapy
work.
isn't going to work.
Yeah. I mean, we had trouble with bad therapists.
I went through 3 therapists before we found one that was, actually good.
Yeah.
One of my therapists just straight up called me an idiot. And, well, there was an expletive in the statement that I'm not allowed to say on YouTube or else my mother is upset with me.
Was that the same one who didn't believe in ADHD, didn't want you to take your ADHD medicine?
No, that was the first therapist. The second one was the one that called me an idiot. The first one, he told me don't take your ADHD meds, and then he got pissed at me when I was hyper.
Yeah, and made him go sit in the waiting room. First of all, we're paying this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, after the first visit, without Lawrence being on his ADHD medication, it should have dawned on him that yes, maybe ADHD does exist.
No, he was a stupid old man. He was like, he looked like he was in his 70s.
Well, that's irrelevant.
Yeah,
though.
well, no, he's clearly set in his ways, so.
Well, I mean, I think the thing he was inflexible.
Yes.
And so when this came out, my husband, I think, because my husband worked from home, he had been taking Lawrence to the appointments. And when he told me this, I said, what? Wait a minute. So he won't let him take his ADHD medicine, which I knew. It was like the second dose of the day. He told us not to give it to him. But then he blames him for being hyper. So we moved on from that one. Then the other one.
A bad one. And I think there was another one at some point. And then I got to a good therapist who I saw for a while.
You may not know if the therapist is not good. Okay. Because children, as you probably know, are not really forthcoming, especially because they may not want to tell on another adult. So the thing to do is you have to ask them questions. You don't want to interrogate them because that's definitely not going to work. But you also don't want to ask closed questions. In other words, how did therapy go? You know what their answer is.
It's just going to be fine.
They're fine. Okay. So that's going to get you nowhere. Just ask them open-ended questions. One thing you could say is, so how do you usually feel after therapy? Does it make you feel better? So, find a way to ask questions and get them talking about how they feel about the therapist. I mean, you also can't say, how do you feel about your therapist? They'll say, okay, I guess. I mean, it's partially a lack of, especially depending on the age, partially a lack of developed language skills. But also, children, just for some reason, they don't want to upset their parents. That's something to keep in mind. they may think, mom or dad or whoever, found this person for me, and I don't want to, they're so busy. I don't want to make a fuss over nothing just because I'm not really comfortable talking to this person. And that's probably, that's more sophisticated than the language than a younger child is going to have. So, you definitely are going to need to think for a while and come up with some questions to ask them. Don't do what I did to a great extent and just assume that your child was in good hands. Because, as I said, it might not, first of all, you might have a bad therapist. But secondly, it just may be that your child doesn't click with this person. It's really important because your child's self-esteem, self-confidence, mental and emotional well-being are in this person's hands as well as your hands. You have to find the right fit. It's really crucial, really important. Especially the last point about therapists. We could probably do a whole video on that, as well as some other points like about medication, the medication aspect of treatment. So if people seem to be interested in those, then we will do full videos on them.
Well, in any case, if you enjoyed this video, you can give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. If you want to say anything at all, you can leave in the form of a comment. And if you like to see more of this content, then you're welcome to subscribe. But in any case, we hope that you have a nice day.
Take care.